have some breaking news for you. U.S. President Donald Trump is angrily reacting once again to Ontario's anti-tariff ad featuring former U.S. President Ronald Reagan.
The latest tariffs on steel and aluminum are unjustified. They're illegal. They're bad for American workers, bad for American industry, and of course for Canadian industry as well.
Tonight, President Trump says he's raising tariffs on some Canadian goods by another 10%.
President Trump says he's imposing an additional 10% tariff on Canada in the wake of a row over a television ad.
Welcome to Redleaf Politics, Canada's fastest-growing channel for sharp, accurate, and fearless political analysis. Today, we're breaking down a major trade clash that has erupted between the United States and Canada. A dispute triggered by a single advertisement, but now threatening billions of dollars in cross-border commerce. The story begins with an Ontario anti-tariff commercial featuring former U.S. President Ronald Reagan. The ad aired during the World Series, one of the most watched events in North America, instantly placing Canada at the center of a heated political storm. President Donald Trump reacted with anger, calling the ad misleading, and accusing Canada of taking advantage of the United States. Within hours, he announced new tariffs on Canadian goods, escalating an already fragile trade relationship. Over the next 8 sections, we'll break down how this dispute exploded, how it affects Canadian workers, and why both nations now stand at a dangerous crossroads. This is Redleaf Politics. Let's begin. President Donald Trump's reaction was swift, emotional, and unusually aggressive. Speaking aboard Air Force One during his flight to Malaysia, Trump told reporters the Ontario ad was a political fraud and an insult to American workers. He insisted Canada had been taking advantage of the United States for years and that the ad proved Canada was acting in bad faith. Trump then announced an immediate 10% tariff increase on certain Canadian imports, calling it a necessary step to defend American industry. This move came on top of existing heavy duties of 25% to 50% on metals, autos, and manufactured goods. Trump emphasized that the United States would not tolerate what he saw as propaganda aired during one of the biggest broadcasts of the year. According to senior staff, the president believed the ad was carefully targeted to influence American public opinion at a critical moment. This belief intensified his response, framing Canada as deliberately undermining U.S. economic messaging. Trump's refusal to meet with Prime Minister Mark Carney during the Malaysia summit further signaled a deepening diplomatic freeze. The World Series became the unexpected stage for one of the most significant diplomatic tensions in recent memory. Ontario's Reagan-based anti-tariff ad ran repeatedly throughout the games, giving it instant visibility across millions of households in both the United States and Canada. Baseball's championship series is more than a sports event. It's a cultural moment. Commercial slots sell for huge amounts and attract massive national attention. By placing the ad here, Ontario ensured the message reached voters in every major American market. U.S. officials viewed this placement as intentional and confrontational. The White House reportedly contacted American broadcasters, urging them to pull the ad, but the broadcasts continued through the weekend. Trump saw the repeated airings as a challenge to his authority, especially because the games coincided with his Asia tour, making it look like he was being criticized at home while abroad. The uproar quickly evolved from a dispute over messaging into a full-blown trade confrontation. The World Series, usually a unifying moment for North America, instead became the flashpoint that pushed tensions into a dangerous new phase. The economic consequences of escalating tariffs are already rippling through Canadian and American industries. Canada sends roughly 75% of its exports to the U.S., meaning every tariff increase hits factories, supply chains, and households almost immediately. Sectors like steel, aluminum, automotive parts, construction materials, agriculture, and manufacturing face heavy new costs. Some Canadian metal producers now confront total tariff loads exceeding 50%, cutting deeply into profit margins and forcing companies to consider slowdowns or temporary layoffs. American firms that rely on Canadian imports, especially auto manufacturers, home builders, and food producers, warn that higher input costs will eventually be passed on to consumers. Supply chain planners say uncertainty is the biggest threat. Companies can handle taxes. What they can't handle is volatility. If investment confidence collapses, future production may shift overseas to more stable environments. Canadian exporters are especially vulnerable, with smaller firms fearing permanent closures. Cross-border freight companies report higher insurance and transportation costs, further raising prices. Meanwhile, economists warn prolonged tariff battles could depress long-term growth across the entire North American region, reducing competitiveness and threatening jobs on both sides of the border. Prime Minister Mark Carney addressed the tariff crisis from the ASEAN summit in Malaysia, delivering a careful but firm response. He acknowledged rising tensions, but emphasized that Canada remains committed to open dialogue and fair negotiations. Carney insisted any new agreement must protect Canadian workers, families, and industries, not simply accommodate U.S. political pressure. He highlighted Canada's upcoming national budget, describing it as a generational investment plan aimed at strengthening long-term economic stability. Carney made clear that Canada would not be intimidated by sudden tariff spikes, especially those triggered by political anger rather than economic reasoning. He also noted Trump's refusal to meet during the summit, calling it unfortunate, but refrained from escalating the rhetoric. Instead, Carney stressed the importance of diplomacy, rules-based trade, and predictable markets. He reassured Canadian businesses that his government is fully engaged with industry leaders, provinces, and international partners. Carney's tone sought to project steadiness and confidence at a moment when cross-border tensions were rapidly worsening. His response laid the groundwork for Canada's broader strategic shift, one that would reduce reliance on the U.S. market. Canada's long-term solution to disruptive U.S. policies is diversification, and the current tariff clash has accelerated that push. Prime Minister Mark Carney emphasized that Canada can no longer rely on a single dominant export market, especially one where political decisions can change overnight. Canada is expanding partnerships across Asia, Southeast Asia, and the Indo-Pacific under new agreements and ongoing negotiations. Nations like Japan, South Korea, India, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Singapore are now key targets for trade growth. Carney highlighted Canadian strengths: advanced manufacturing, clean energy technology, agri-food production, AI research, and critical minerals. With global demand rising, Canada aims to position itself as a stable, reliable partner outside the shadow of U.S. unpredictability. Diversification also includes upgrading infrastructure, expanding port capacity, and reducing supply chain vulnerabilities. While the U.S. remains a crucial ally, Canada's strategy now prioritizes balance over dependency. Businesses are being encouraged to explore new markets, and federal incentives are aligning with this transition. The tariff crisis, while damaging, has revealed a deeper truth. Canada's economic resilience depends on global reach, not narrow reliance. The diversification era has officially begun. Ontario Premier Doug Ford found himself at the center of an international storm he did not fully anticipate. Initially, Ford defended the anti-tariff ad fiercely, arguing that Ontario's manufacturing backbone was being crushed by U.S. duties and that bold messaging was necessary. He even vowed to broadcast the commercial in every Republican-led district across the United States. But when Washington froze key trade discussions and signaled rising frustration, Ford faced mounting pressure from business leaders and federal officials. Eventually, he announced the campaign would be paused, but only after World Series broadcasts concluded. This timing angered U.S. officials, who believed the ad's continued airing was a deliberate slap during peak visibility. Meanwhile, the Reagan Foundation criticized the ad for rearranging Reagan's words, adding another layer of controversy. Ford's attempt to balance political messaging, economic protection, and cross-border diplomacy quickly became a tightrope act. His decision to delay the pause frustrated American leaders while confusing some domestic audiences. Ford now faces the challenge of defending Ontario's interests without deepening the rift between Ottawa, Washington, and key trading partners. The future of US-Canada relations now hangs on whether diplomacy can outrun political anger. With tariffs rising and negotiations frozen, both economies face major risks. If tensions continue, manufacturers could suspend investment, exporters may downsize, and supply chains could shift permanently to avoid uncertainty. Canada is ramping up diversification efforts, but those strategies take time. Meanwhile, Trump's escalating tariffs appear driven not only by trade concerns, but also domestic political calculations. The Reagan ad controversy may fade, but the underlying strain will remain if structural issues aren't resolved. Economists warn that prolonged disputes weaken North American competitiveness at a time when global rivals are expanding rapidly. The next few weeks will be critical. Quiet diplomacy could restart dialogue, but missteps, a new statement, another ad, or further tariffs could push relations into deeper conflict. The world is watching whether two tightly linked economies can restore stability or drift toward a damaging trade standoff. One thing is certain, the consequences will reach ordinary families, workers, and industries long before leaders settle their political battles. Thanks for watching Redleaf Politics. This US-Canada tariff clash is far from over, and we'll keep tracking every update that impacts Canadians. If you want sharp, fast political analysis, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Stay informed, stay aware, and we'll see you in the next video.